if you're able to get people to buy your stuff out of love, I think you're either a genius or that number is very low that maybe it's not a business.
Hello and welcome back to Indie Bites, the podcast where I bring you stories of fellow indie hackers in 15 minutes or less. Today I'm talking to Kevon Cheung, who is the person to speak to if you're wanting to learn about building in public. After not getting the fulfillment he desired from the VC-funded startup dream, Kevon struck out on his own in 2020 to become an indie hacker. Since then, he's written the definitive guide to building in public, launched a Build in Public mastery course, and even wrote a book called Find Joy in Chaos. In this episode, we talk about the myths surrounding building in public, how to do it effectively even if you feel like you don't have anything to share, and why Kevon decided on a creator business and not a SaaS. Now, if you're a solo founder like me trying to build in public, having a support network around you is vital. I do love my Twitter friends, but being part of a tight-knit community really helps me stay focused on getting this podcast out, which is why I'm again thankful that Ramen Club is sponsoring Indie Bites. Ramen Club is a community of indie hackers and entrepreneurs designed to help you get to ramen profitability. We have 4 remote co-working sessions every week, masterminds, accountability calls, live AMAs, a fractional CFO, in-house VA, discounts, and so much more. So if you want to join me and my bootstrapper friends, head to ramenclub.so and use code IndieBites to let the founder Charlie know I sent you. Link is also in the show notes. Let's get into it. Kevon, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you, James. I've heard of your show since probably day one, so I'm really excited to be here.
Well, Kevon, I'm excited to get into it and learn a little bit more about building in public. I want to start off with when you first started to become an indie hacker. You had this 6 months of what you call building credibility. And in your book, you've got this great exchange with your wife where she said, Kevon, that's great that you've been building your Twitter audience, but when are you going to start charging and making some money?
Do you think more indie hackers should be asking the same question to themselves that your wife did? When are you going to start charging people? Or do you think that 6 months of building that credibility is super important?
I think it depends on your approach. So it's definitely important to start charging because like when we talk about entrepreneurship, I think about you're creating value and you get something in exchange. So if you don't get that exchange, this is not entrepreneurship. This is more like charity and this is not going to sustain. So I like to think that it is different kind of approach and it depends how you do it. For example, I started with a startup background and I had some savings and I had a bunch of failures starting different things before. So this time around, because I knew on the online world, credibility is everything. So I'm willing to bet 6 months in order to just explore a new niche, figure out the online business model and build up my own name. But I assume like if people don't have the failures before or don't have a runway, then they should be asking this question early on, perhaps like doing some services just to get things kicked off.
And your first thing you launched was your definitive guide to building in public. What made you go down this building in public route? What attracted you to this? And in November 2020, did you know that you were going to go down the building public route? Were you just sort of looking out for different ideas?
No, James. Basically, when I first started out, I didn't know what I wanted to talk about or focus on. I still remember I was writing individual blog posts at first. So 8 weeks, 8 blog posts, and I put it out there and I got like 30 to 40 people to read it each time. And I was like, no, this is not going to build my name, 30 to 40 people each time. So I actually did some research on like buzzword and I got like micro SaaS, no code, build in public. And guess what? Build in public had 0 to 10 search volume in the US each month. So basically Google is telling me, hey, don't focus on this. No one cared about build in public. But I see a different thing happening on Twitter. Like the movement is starting and more people are getting in. And James, the key thing that got me into this is when I look at this concept, building in public, it is like calling my name. Like because I stand for honesty, helpfulness, I'm willing to be transparent. So when I think about this topic, I'm like, I can talk about it for 10 years or 20 years. So I'm set on that. Let me be the person who teach people how to do it.
And was it a case of writing this guide? And also, how did you learn all the stuff to write this guide? I've read it. It's fantastic. It's super in depth.
How did I learn the topic when I had zero knowledge? Basically, when I decided I want to write it, the first thing I did is not to write. I went on indiehackers.com and they have a group called Building Public. And I read every single post in there and I take notes on what people are asking and what people are saying. And not just that, because I have read so much, I started hopping into the new posts to help people out by referencing what I learned from other people. So after a few weeks, I know enough so that I kind of just structure on the information into this 9-chapter guide. So to all the people out there who thinks, I don't have a niche, I don't have knowledge on a topic, well, you can learn.
I like this approach that sort of anyone can learn any topic. They just got to go deep into it. Now, a lot of indie hackers, as I mentioned earlier, would have thought about building in public. They would have seen people do it. Some are probably doing it very successfully at the moment. But what does it mean? How do you do it? I just thought building in public is sharing MRR screenshots on Twitter.
Yeah, so first impression, right? Sharing revenue, sharing numbers, everyone is happy and get all the attention. That's first impression for sure. Second impression is usually, hey, James, you should share your ups and downs and just be transparent. And that sounds really easy, right? And in fact, my first course, I was basically just telling people to do that and prompting them to write something authentic from their life. It sounds easy, but then as I teach more people and drill down, actually building in public is not just sharing ups and downs of the journey. I actually think building in public is hitting 4 birds with 1 stone. And perhaps to make it easier to understand, I can use my Twitter book, Find Joy in Chaos, to explain this. The 4 birds is basically like you get really good feedback from people if you are able to involve people. So what I did with the book is that I put out the table of content and I scheduled 10 interviews and asked people to critique my table of content. And that leads us to point number 2, which is you basically guarantee yourself success when you build in public, because these people who help you in the early days, they would buy your product. They would help you spread the word because they already get value from it. And then the third and the fourth point is like you basically build a lot of trust and early adopters around your product. And then as you go out and launch it, you get all these people helping you to shout it, to share it. And that is unbelievable because we live in a world where people trust people. So if other people are saying this is good, it probably is good. So it has a lot going on behind just these 3 words.
Kevin, I wonder if this leads to any false positives when you've got a group of people that are supporting you as a creator and they're willing to buy almost everything you do. I've got a lovely group of friends and Twitter followers who are really supportive of things I do. They buy my products. But yeah, does that not lead to maybe a few false positives where people are buying stuff that is not actually very much of a viable business or product?
I get what you mean. I think this is where you as an entrepreneur need to judge. Like if you're able to get people to buy your stuff out of love, I think you're either a genius or that number is very low that maybe it's not a business. But at the end of the day, you have to watch, like, are people getting value from you? Are they learning? Are they making progress? If you sense that they're not, then no, please don't keep doing this. So actually, James, you raise a good point. In the early days, people actually say, Kevon, I want to support you. $5 a month, let me pay. Yeah. And I was so reluctant because I feel like, no, don't do that. Like, you're gonna mess up my thought process in building this business. But I get it now. Like, people want to support, and that's part of the journey too.
Now, many people listening will be at, I don't know, 400 or 500 follower stage. They want to grow it. They don't know where to start. They think if they're just starting building in public, that they've not got much of an audience that will start to engage with them. Those people that are at quite a small audience size, where do they start?
I think it all comes down to sharing to the person who is right behind you. Like, a lot of people, when they come to me, they're like, Kevon, I just don't have anything meaningful to say. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, well, if you're looking at someone like Arvid Khan or even Kevon or James, of course you don't feel like you have meaningful things to say. But don't look at these guys. Look at people who are right behind you, maybe just starting out. And there are a bunch of them. You're just not paying attention to them. For example, in my book, I talk about how people always follow the influencer, right? The 30K followers, 50K. But they're not paying attention to the people with like 5 followers and 15 followers. That's wrong. Like, I would put all my energy onto these beginners because then I can know for sure I can help them. So basically just share your lesson learns, share your struggles. But more importantly, I think they should have a project to share, because when there's a project with like a start and end date, people just get more attached to it because they want to see you finish it.
Let's move on from building in public and talk about you, Kevon, making a living as a creator. Now, you've gone down this route of making info products, courses, books, newsletters, and making money through that, versus a lot of indie hackers I speak to who choose the SaaS route. Why did you go down this info product route or creator route as opposed to a SaaS product?
That's a really good question. I think this is the first time I heard this question so far. The fact is, I started my career as a software engineer, and then my last startup was also a SaaS. So why did I not focus on the SaaS? It's because, well, I don't code anymore. So I'm more on content community side, even for the last startup. And when I decided to go on my own path, I think to myself, hey, if I need a partner, this stuff is going to take even longer to get off the ground. So I should really look for a path that I can do it myself. And if I compare creators creating info products, which I'm already doing, versus a SaaS, which I need a technical co-founder, creator makes more sense to me.
Yeah, well, you're keeping yourself busy with the info products at the moment. And I'm wondering where you did the guide. I think that's a great place to start, because it was let me learn all the knowledge, put it down into writing, and then you got a base to build on the other products, the book. The course specifically, how did you make the course different from the guide? Because the guide is pretty definitive as it is named. What additional stuff did you add to the course to make it have value in itself over the guide?
Hey, James, I just want to say your questions are brilliant. Like, I never get asked this kind of question. Okay, first of all, it is 2 different mindsets. A public guide like the one I have, 9 chapter, 10,000 words, that is coming from a content creator. So I basically tell you the why and the what, and I show you a bit of how, but there's no exercise to unblock that for you. But as an educator running a course, I know a lot of courses out there are just presentation and lectures. I don't do that. I actually design a lot of fun and sometimes irrelevant exercise just to help you, be a bit more vulnerable online, just to help you dig into your day-to-day to get that story so that you can share with people.
And these info products are inherently single purchase, not recurring, and SaaS products are recurring. Much easier to predict revenue when you've got a graph that is going up and you mitigate against churn. Whereas when you've got info products, book, course, it's very much harder to predict your revenue because you've got to make these one-time sales. How are you mitigating against that?
If one has been a creator long enough, one would understand that if you want sales, you have to actively talk about something. Like this month, if you talk about your course, you will sell your course. Next month, you talk about your book, your course won't sell, and then you sell your books. So it is honestly very hectic. But I think that's the path, that's the life that we choose. And it is very unpredictable, but all we can assume is that you basically need to launch something every single month. And I'm not saying you need to launch new products. For example, you can launch a new cohort of your course, or you can launch a new version of your book.
And in some ways, that's not too dissimilar to shipping features in a SaaS product. You're constantly having to do more stuff to keep the product valuable for current users, to avoid churn, and to do marketing stuff to attract new users. So I think that's kind of similar in that way.
Except you have to attract new customer for your info products.
That's true. All right, Kevon, I finished every episode on 3 recommendations: a book, a podcast, and an indie hacker you're inspired by or follow.
Yeah, for book, I would definitely recommend Life is What You Make It. Find Your Own Path to Fulfillment. It's by Peter Buffett. The other book that really helped me, I think I read it last year end of last year, is the 100 million offer. In terms of podcasts, I'm actually not a big podcast person because I don't commute anymore. But if I need to just get some inspiration, I actually listen to Steph Taylor's Social Lit. And the other one is Arvid Khan's Bootstrap Founder, because we talk a lot about the similar topics. So it's good. And then in terms of indie hackers, I do have 3. The first one is Monica Lent. The other one is Jay Clouds. And then the last one is Marie Ng, who's running Llama Life. Just really enjoy people who don't talk about business all the time. Show a bit of personality, the dog, the workspace, something she believed in. Not a lot, but like just a little bit. And I feel like I'm so close to her journey. So I love it so much.
Kevon, great recommendations. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Indie Bites.
Thank you, James. Your tough questions make me really happy.
Appreciate it, dude. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Indie Bites. Links for everything discussed will be in the show notes as always. So if you want to join me and others in the friendliest bootstrapper community, try out Ramen Club. And if you want your podcast edited like Indie Bites, head to podpanda.co. See you next week.